Hey everybody, how are you? Nice to see you again. I never thought I'd say this, but I miss the bells at school and living by a schedule. It is Monday at 4:40 and I'm not sure when you'll be watching this video, but I hope that you're doing well. I wanted to start by reading part of a poem that's famous and powerful, and it sort of befits the time in which we're living because it talks about being determined and resolute and proud. And I think that oftentimes when we're down, when times get tough, it's easy and comfortable to just sort of sit and do nothing. But I think that the best thing that we can do is rise to the occasion and to be the best person that we can be. So I'm going to read you a poem by Maya Angelou, who is the most famous African American female poet alive today, and it's called Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes bringing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear on the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. And I think we can too. I think we can rise to the occasion and bring our best selves to this situation. It's not easy and it might be boring, but we can do it and we can do a good job. So that's just the way I wanted to say hello to you today. So down to business. Let me get a drink first. First of all, I need to remind you that this work is mandatory. Whether you think that it is or not, it is. I sent out an email today that described to you the new grading system and the things that you should be aware of, and make sure that you read that. But just because you're not getting a grade per se doesn't mean that you're not getting graded, observed, assessed. When you hand in work to me, I make comments on it, and then I give you a grade of C for complete or M for missing if I never got it from you. And when we go to do grades this year, for the rest of the year, I think we're looking at that system. But starting next week, or actually, sorry, starting tomorrow when I put this videotape up, on Tuesdays for English, I have to take attendance. And so I have to hear from all of you, all 76 of my 10th graders, either through email or by turning in your work. So I know that you are with me and that you've watched the video and that you are doing what you need to do. And those students that don't report in to me, I have to let administration know that that's the case. I am a little worried because I sent out that email today and I said that for the last week's work that I posted, when I sent the email in the morning, only 20 out of 76 students had turned in their assignment for the week. By this afternoon, I probably got 10 more, so that's 30 out of 76 students that have turned in their work. And there are still students who haven't taken the quiz for chapters 1 through 3 yet either. So I'm not sure what's going on your end. I know it's not easy. I know there are challenges. I know there's challenges with technology. There's emotional challenges. This is hard emotionally. It's a different way of learning. Also, there's a challenge of finding quiet space to work. I know, even though I have a little office here, our house is little, and so all of the noise filters up here. And so when it's time for me to do a video, I have to have everybody in the house super quiet. So I don't know what your circumstances are, but share them with me or share them with another teacher, and maybe we can help you come up with a solution. But when I looked through my paper where I keep grades, there are many students, more than half, that don't have last week or the week before's work done. And so I'm posting this work as the third time that you will have to do work and still work on that study guide that you picked up. So if you haven't been keeping up, it's going to be more difficult to catch up. So please, I just encourage you to log into Schoology every day and to get things done as soon as they're there, because if you don't do math on Monday and you don't do English on Tuesday, it's just going to be there waiting for you. So that's my little pep talk and my reality check for you. So make sure that you get that done, okay? So I have for you the Daily Discovery, and there was some confusion about what to do with it last week, and it's an illusion. And the confusion was that the way that it was formatted on Schoology looked like you had to do something. But the only thing that you have to do is learn for the sake of learning, and listen and look for them in real life, and you don't have to report back to me. So let me remind you what an illusion is. And this is a different definition from last week, but it's the same, just worded differently. So an illusion is when an author or a poet makes an indirect reference to some idea, figure, other text, place, or event that originates from outside of the text. It could also refer to something that happens earlier in the text. This is often called an internal illusion as opposed to a regular or external illusion. The verb form of the noun illusion is allude. So you could state that a writer alludes to or makes an allusion to something. For instance, it's particularly common for writers to make allusions in their work to the Bible or mythology. Allusions are subtle and they're indirect, hinting at something you're expected to know without explicitly telling you what it is. This is a literary device, and it's used to enhance your text, often by making it more relatable to the reader or illustrating an example of the text's overarching themes. Allusions are commonly used metaphorically, but can be used ironically. I have some more examples of allusions being used in everyday speech, and then I'll get to illusion number 2 that we'll be doing. So people often use allusions every day without even realizing it. Here are some allusion examples you might have heard or even said yourself. Chocolate cake is my Achilles heel, or pizza is my Achilles heel, or whatever your favorite food is. The allusion is to Achilles' heel, which is a Greek myth about the hero Achilles and how the back of his heel was his one weakness. In this case, the speaker's weakness is the chocolate cake. Or somebody might say, why are you always such a Scrooge? It doesn't cost much and it'll be fun. This quotation makes an allusion to Ebenezer Scrooge, the central character in Charles Dickens' famous Christmas story, A Christmas Carol. Scrooge is known for being selfish and a penny pincher, Therefore, calling someone a Scrooge is essentially calling them a cheapskate and a grouch. And the last example is, she's a good swimmer, but she's no Ariel. This allusion is to the fairy tale and the famous Disney movie, The Little Mermaid, about a mermaid named Ariel. Referring to someone as no Ariel implies that they're not as natural in the water as a mermaid would be. Make sense? So our allusion today is also a biblical allusion, as the one from last week was. And it's called Good Samaritan. And you may have heard that phrase a lot on the news as of late. So I want to tell you where it comes from. There's actually a place called Samaria, and someone who is from Samaria is a Samaritan. So the story goes that there was a man going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was robbed and beaten by thieves. There was a priest and another person who witnessed this, but they pretended not to see, and they continued to the other side of the road. But there was a person from the town of Samaria walking by, and even though he and the injured man were enemies, he helped him. The meaning of a good Samaritan is to help a stranger. A good Samaritan is a person who helps someone in their time of need. That's when a person's true colors show. It also means being good-hearted and helpful. And there are so many situations of good Samaritans going on right now. I see them all the time on the news and in social media, and it really is very heartwarming how in hard times people help each other. So that's allusion number 2. Let me get my checklist here. All right, we're going to dive into the book now. You were to read chapter 7 and 8 for today, and you do need your book because we will be close reading 3 very important passages in this book. We are at the point of the book where chapter 8 is the climax of the novel, and chapter 7 really is building up to that, if you can think of that plot graph we had with the rising action and the climax and then the falling action. And even though there's only 2 chapters that we're discussing, we're going to close read 3 of the passages. Okay. So we'll start with chapter 7, called Shadows and Tall Trees. And just the title itself, it really alludes to a sense of uncertainty and a build-up to the climax of the novel. So I'm going to read you a little bit of a summary for chapter 7 and then pause and do a close reading of part of the text, okay? Okay. So in chapter 7, the boys are still traveling up toward the mountain because chapter 6 was Beasts from Air, which is when the parachutist came down. And so Sam and Eric, the twins, and did you notice with Sam and Eric, they used to be Sam and Eric, and now their names are together, S-A-M-N-E-R-I-C, Sam and Eric. They've become like one person, one character. I thought that was pretty cool. So Ralph is really having a moment there, and he's gazing at the choppy ocean, and he's thinking about the fact that the boys have become undisciplined and they're filthy, and he looks out at the water, and that's all he can see is this vast expanse of ocean, just endless. He can't see anything else. And he feels that the ocean is like an impenetrable wall blocking any hope that they have from escaping the island. The ocean is a symbol in that novel as well. There's so many symbols, but it's a symbol of hopelessness. And Simon comes up to Ralph and he says to him, "Don't worry, Ralph, you'll make it home okay." And he says it a couple of times, and I'm wondering if any of you noticed how foreshadowing that was, because he doesn't say we'll make it home okay. He says to Ralph, you'll make it home okay. So later on in chapter 7, Jack suggests that they hunt a pig while they continue to look for the beast. and the boys agree, and they start to track a large boar that's on the island and leads them on a wild chase. This is important because this is the very first time that Ralph, who'd never been on a hunt before, agrees to go on a hunt, and he gets quickly caught up in the exhilaration of the chase. And this is purposeful on Golding's part to include Ralph in this chase in chapter 7. He excitedly flings his spear at the boar, and he hits the boar, and he's just over the moon about it. And Jack actually gets injured by the tusk on his arm of the pig. The boar escapes, and the boys remain in a frenzy in the aftermath of the hunt. And excited, they reenact the chase of the boar, with a boy named Robert playing the boar. They dance, chant, and jab Robert with their spears, and they lose sight of the fact that they're only playing a game. So on page 114 of your book, we're going to read a section right after the boar got away. I'm starting directly in the middle of 114. Jack shouted, "Make a ring." The circle moved in and round. Robert squealed in mock terror, then in real pain. Remember how I talked about how oftentimes primitive civilizations used to reenact hunts and different events as forms of entertainment? And that's what the boys are doing. They're so excited about this hunt that they're reenacting it. "Stop it, you're hurting." The butt end of the spear fell on his back as he blundered among them. "Hold him." They got his arms and legs. Ralph, carried away by sudden, thick excitement, grabbed Eric's spear and jabbed at Robert with him. "Kill him, kill him." All at once, Robert was screaming and struggling with the strength of frenzy. Jack had him by the hair and was brandishing his knife. Behind him was Roger, fighting to get close. The chant rose ritually, and at the last moment of a dance, the chant rose ritually, as at the last moment of a dance or a hunt. Kill the pig, cut his throat, kill the pig, bash him in. Ralph, too, is fighting to get near, to get a handful of that brown, vulnerable flesh. Can you believe it? Ralph's trying to get in there, too. The desire to squeeze and hurt was overmastering. Jack's arm came down. The heavy circle cheered and made pig-dying noises. Then they lay quiet, panting, listening to Robert's frightened snivels. Snivel is a cry, a snotty cry. He wiped his face with a dirty arm and made an effort to retrieve his status. "Oh, my bum." He rubbed his rump. Jack rolled over. "That was a good game." "Just a game," said Ralph uneasily. "I got a jolly badly hurt at Rugger once." "We ought to have a drum," said Maurice. "Then we could do it properly." Ralph looked at him. "How properly?" "I don't know. You want a fire, I think, and a drum, and to keep time with the drum." "You want a pig," said Roger, "like a real hunt." "Or someone to pretend," said Jack. "You could get someone to dress up as a pig, and then he could act, pretend to knock me over and all that." "You want a real pig," said Robert, still caressing his backside, "because you've got to kill him." "Use a little one," said Jack. And everybody laughed. Are they joking? Use a little one. We'll have to see how that goes. So as chapter 7 continues, darkness falls, and Ralph says, "Hey, let's wait till morning when we can investigate the beast." And Jack challenges him. Another conflict and another challenge between the two leaders, the two boys. Jack thinks that Ralph is afraid to go at night, and he decides to join the hunt anyway, and they start to climb the mountain. And then Jack goes on alone to the summit. He returns, breathlessly claiming to have seen the monster. So Ralph and Roger climb up to have a look and see something terrifying. A large, shadowy form with the shape of a giant ape making strange flapping sounds in the wind, and horrified they hurry down the mountain and warn the group. And what we know is that it was the parachutists, and the noises are the parachute being caught in the wind. We also know that if they had gone up in the daytime, like Ralph had suggested, they would have seen that it was just a parachutist, just a dead human. But instead, now they have this sense of that there's a beast, that there's a real beast, that it's not just talk anymore, that it's been discovered. So in this novel, in chapter 7, there's a reminder that humans have an instinct toward savagery. Remember, one of the themes of this novel is civility versus savagery. And we see our character Ralph, who is the most civilized character, edging toward savagery in chapter 7. He joins the hunt, he joins the dance, he feels the urge, he feels the instinct. And as readers, we're almost disappointed. We expect better of him, but we forget that he's just a boy. He is unable to avoid the excitement of the hunt, and he gets caught up in what we call bloodlust. Golding implies that every individual, every person, however strong his or her instinct towards civilization and order is, has an undeniable drive towards savagery as well. Okay. By this point in the novel, there is a real conflict that is escalated for power, a real struggle for power. We've got Jack's brand of violence and savagery and quote-unquote fun. And we've got Ralph's disciplined community and his idea of order and rescue. And we wonder in chapter 7, which way is it going to go? Which one is going to win? Jack manipulates Ralph in chapter 7 by calling him a coward and a bully. Not a bully, but a coward by not wanting to go up at night. And chapter 8 is the most important chapter in the novel. I'm not saying the rest of it's not important, but so much happens and so much becomes clear that we really need to take a good look at chapter 8. It's called Gift for the Darkness. So it's the next morning after they've discovered the beast, and the news of the monster has the boys in a state of an uproar as they gather on the beach. Jack calls an assembly. For the first time. He does it clumsily, and he doesn't blow the shell well, but he calls one. And Ralph isn't happy about that. But Jack claims that Ralph is a coward who should be removed from his leadership role. And I want to look at that section and read that together. It's on page 125. Sorry, I'm looking for my pages. Okay, 125, about 3/4 of the way down. I've called an assembly, said Jack, because a lot of things. First, you know now, we've seen the beast. We crawled up. We were only a few feet away. The beast sat up and looked at us. I don't know what it was, what it does. We don't even know what it is. The beast comes out of the sea, out of the dark. Trees. Quiet, shouted Jack. You listen, the beast is sitting up there, whatever it is. Perhaps it's waiting. Hunting. Yes, hunting. Hunting, said Jack. He remembered his age-old tremors in the forest. Yes, the beast is a hunter. Only, shut up. The next thing is, we couldn't kill it. And the next is, that Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. I've got the conch. Ralph thinks you're cowards, running away from the boar and the beast, and that's not all. There was a kind of sigh on the platform, as if everyone knew what was coming. Jack's voice went up, tremulous yet determined, pushing against the uncooperative silence. He's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. Jack clutched the conch to him. He was a coward himself. For a moment he paused and then went on. On top, when Roger and me went on, he stayed back. I went too. After. The two boys glared at each other through screens of hair. I went on too, said Ralph. Then I ran away, and so did you. Call me a coward, then. Jack turned to the hunters. He's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't a prefect, and we don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk, shouted Ralph. Talk. Who wanted it? Who called the meeting? Jack turned red in the face, his chin sunk back. He glowered up under his eyebrows. All right, then, he said in tones of deep meaning and menace. All right. He held the conch against his chest with one hand and stabbed the air with his index finger. Who thinks Ralph ought not be chief? He looked expectantly at the boys ranged around who had frozen. Under the palms there was deadly silence. A little foreshadowing there. Hands up, said Jack strongly. Whoever wants Ralph not to be chief. The silence continued, breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks, then came back with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided embarrassment of linking with another's eyes. How many think? His voice trailed off. The hands that held the conch shook. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. All right, then. He laid the conch with great care in the grass at his feet. The humiliating tears were running from the corners of each eye. I'm not going to play any longer. Not with you. Most of the boys were looking down now at the grass or their feet, and Jack cleared his throat again. I'm not going to be part of Ralph's lot. He looked along the right-hand logs, numbering the hunters that had been a choir. I'm going off by myself. He can catch his own pigs. Anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too. He blundered out of the triangle toward the drop to the white sand. Jack! Jack turned and looked at Ralph. For a moment he paused and then cried out, high-pitched, enraged, No! He leapt down from the platform and ran along the beach, paying no heed to the steady fall of his tears, and until he dived into the forest, Ralph watched him. You know, the weird thing is about that scene is that by chapter 8, you almost forget that these are boys. They seem more grown up because of the way that they're acting. And this chapter reminds us that these are still little boys. Jack's feelings get hurt because they don't want to vote Ralph off of being leader. And Jack runs away, and he's crying as he runs away. So I wanted to read that to you. So Ralph doesn't know what to do after that. And Piggy is excited. He's thrilled that Jack is gone. And Simon suggests they all return to the mountain to search for the beast. Ralph slips into a depression, and Piggy cheers him up, and he says, we should start a new signal fire, but here on the beach. And Ralph thinks that's a good idea, and it kind of restores his hope again that they'll be rescued. The boys set to work, and they build a new fire, but sadly, during that time, many of them sneak away, and they go join Jack's group. So eventually, Ralph is left with Piggy and Simon and Sam and Eric and the little ones. And the other boys have gone to join Jack's tribe to hunt. So along another stretch of sand, Jack gathers his new tribe, and he declares himself the chief of this new tribe. In a savage frenzy, the hunters kill a sow, and a sow is a female pig. And we're going to read that section very closely in a moment. Actually, right now. So we're on page 134 and 135. This is a pretty brutal scene, and I wish we were in the classroom. I'd rather be with you answering your questions while we read it. Because this just isn't a hunt to hunt for meat. This chapter and these 2 pages indicate that this is a murder. This is a murder of a pig. I want you to pay attention to the language that William Golding uses to describe the murder of this female pig. It is violent, and it uses sexually violent terminology, and in no way does that mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, except that Golding is trying to point out the rage that these boys have and the unnecessary act of violence that they inflicted on this pig. So let's take a look at it. On page 134, we've got a bunch of pigs lying there, and I'll stop in a second. The pigs lay, bloated bags of fat, sensuously enjoying the shadows under the trees. There was no wind, and they were unsuspicious, and practice had made Jack silent as the shadows. Interestingly, we've got 2 references to shadows right there in that 1-2 sentences. He stole away again and instructed his hidden hunters. Presently they all began to inch forward, sweating in the silence and the heat. Under the trees an ear flapped idly. A little apart from the rest, sunk in deep maternal bliss, maternal means motherly, lay the largest sow of the lot, female pig. She was black and pink, and the great bladder of her belly was fringed with a row of piglets that slept or burrowed and squeaked. So it's not just a female pig, it's a mother pig, and it's a nursing mother pig. She's got a bunch of piglets that are suckling, and this is the pig that they're going to go after. And the crime in this is that if they kill this mother pig, all of the babies will die too, which really isn't smart. 15 yards from the drove, Jack stopped, and his arms straightened, pointing at the sow. She looked round in inquiry to make sure that everyone understood. He looked round. And the other boys nodded. A row of right arms slid back. They're holding their spears. Now! The drove of pigs started up, and at a range of only 10 yards, the wooden spears with fire-hardened points flew toward the chosen pig. One piglet, with a demented shriek, rushed into the sea, trailing Roger's spear behind it. The sow gave a gasping squeal and staggered up, with 2 spears sticking in her fat flank. The boys shouted and rushed forward. The piglets scattered, and the sow burst the advancing line and went crashing through the forest after her. They raced along the pig track, but the forest was too dark and tangled, so that Jack, cursing, stopped them and cast among the trees. Then he said nothing for a time, but breathed fiercely, so that they were awed by him, and looked at each other in uneasy admiration. Presently he stabbed down at the ground with his finger. There! Before the others could examine the drop of blood, Jack had swerved off, judging a trace, touching a bough that gave. So he followed, mysteriously right and assured, and the hunters trod behind him. He stopped before a covert. In there. Just so you know, the covert that they're talking about is Simon's special place. And so Simon is in the covert, and he actually witnesses this, which becomes important when we talk about the end of the chapter. They surrounded the covert, but the sow got away with the sting of another spear in her flank. The trailing butts hindered her, and the sharp cross-cut points were a torment. She blundered into a tree, forcing a spear still deeper, and after that any of the hunters could follow her easily by the drops of vivid blood. The afternoon wore on, hazy and dreadful with damp heat. The sow staggered, her way ahead of them, bleeding and mad, and the hunters followed, wedded to her in lust. They could see her now, nearly got up with her, but she spurted with her last strength and held ahead of them again. They were just behind her when she staggered into an open space where bright flowers grew and butterflies danced round each other, and the air was hot and still. Here, struck down by the heat, the sow fell, and the hunters hurled themselves at her. This dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She squealed and bucked, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran round the heap, prodding with his spear whenever pig flesh appeared. Jack was on top of the sow, stabbing downward with his knife. Roger found a lodgment for his point and began to push till he was leaning with his whole weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The sow collapsed under them, and they were heavy and fulfilled upon her. So I want you to ponder that language a little bit and why Golding would use that. In that last paragraph, the sow falls and they hurl himself at her. There's dreadful eruptions from an unknown world. She's frantic, she squeals and bucks. The air is full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. There's prodding with his spear. Jack is on top, stabbing downward. Roger finds a lodgment for his point and pushes, leaning with his whole weight. And the spear moves forward inch by inch. And there's a squealing that becomes a high-pitched scream. There's blood spouting over Jack's hands. The sow collapses, and they're heavy and fulfilled upon her. Really sad. It's really a sad, hard scene to read. So the next section that I want to take a look at is the section where Simon is talking to the Lord of the Flies, and that's on page 143. Just give me a second here. Check this off. And I want to read this section because it's confusing, and you probably didn't understand what was going on. And that's because Simon is having a seizure and hallucinating, and also has just witnessed this horrendous violence, and he's a peace-loving person, so for him, it's a really difficult situation. So, what did I want to say about that before I read it? Just give me a sec. So, what I want to say, I guess, is that critics have argued this scene with Simon for years, since this book was written, and it's arguably one of the most important scenes in the novel. Critics have said that it's a retelling of Jesus' confrontation with Satan during his 40 days in the wilderness, a story originally told in the Gospels of the New Testament. And many critics have described Simon as a Christ-like figure, for he has a mystical connection to the environment. He possesses a saintly and selfless disposition, and he meets... I'm going to save that part. Simon seems to hear the Lord of the Flies speaking to him and threatening him with what he fears the most. He's unable to stand any longer, and he collapses into some sort of faint. So on page 143, I'm just going to start right at the top. And we learn about the Lord of the Flies. "You're a silly little boy," said the Lord of the Flies, "just an ignorant, silly little boy." Simon moved his swollen tongue, but said nothing. "Don't you agree?" said the Lord of the Flies. "Aren't you just a silly little boy?" Simon answered him with the same silent voice. "Well then," said the Lord of the Flies, "you'd better run off and play with the others. They think you're batty. You don't want Ralph to think you're batty, do you? You like Ralph a lot, don't you? And Piggy and Jack?" Simon's head was tilted slightly up. He could not break away, and the Lord of the Flies hung in space before him. So I wish, again, we were in the classroom. What is the Lord of the Flies? It's actually the pig's head that they've cut off the pig and stuck on a sharpened stick. And this becomes important later. There is a stick, this is a stick, guys, and it's sharpened on one end, and then it's sharpened on the other one. And they stick one point into the ground, and on the top of the stick they put the pig's head, and it's dribbling blood, and it attracts the flies because of the heat and the smell. And so we've got a pig's head that's covered in flies, and that's what Simon is looking at as he's dehydrated and hallucinating and having his seizure. What are you going to do out here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me? Simon shook. There isn't anyone to help you, only me, and I'm the beast. Simon's mouth labored, brought forth words. Pig's head on a stick. Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill, said the head. For a moment or two the forest and all the other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. You knew, didn't you? I'm part of you. Close, close, close. I'm the reason why it's no-go, why things are what they are. The laughter shivered again. Come now, said Lord of the Flies. Get back to the others and we'll forget the whole thing. Simon's head wobbled. His eyes were half closed, as though he were imitating the obscene thing on the stick. He knew that one of his times was coming on. The Lord of the Flies was expanding like a balloon. This is ridiculous. You know perfectly well you'll only meet me down there, so don't try to escape. Simon's body was arched and stiff. That's where he's having his seizure. The Lord of the Flies spoke in the voice of a schoolmaster. This has gone quite far enough, my poor misguided child. Do you think you know better than I do? There was a pause. I'm warning you. I'm going to get angry. Do you see? You're not wanted. Understand? We are going to have fun on this island, so don't try it on, my poor misguided boy, or else. Simon found he was looking into a vast mouth. There was a blackness within, a blackness that spread. Or else, said the Lord of the Flies, we shall do you. See? Jack and Roger and Maurice and Robert and Bill and Piggy and Ralph. Do you? See? Simon was inside the mouth. He fell down and lost consciousness. Again, I wish I could answer your questions, but it's a pretty intense scene. So if you have any questions, you can actually just email me them, and I will definitely answer them without a doubt. So that's our study of chapter 7 and 8 for Lord of the Flies. I want you to continue doing your study guides, so by now you should have chapters 1 through 8 finished in that study guide, okay? Here's a whole new set of work. We're going to talk about this week's choice and exploration, which really just means homework. But the cool thing is you get to choose which homework you want to do. There are 3 choices. I'm going to go over those in a second. You pick one. A couple of you did 2, and what I did is I counted that as extra credit. But you just need to do 1. So the 3 choices for this week, I've got 2 that are creative choices. I have to get a tissue, excuse me. Two that are creative choices, and 1 that is more of a research choice, although it's fun as well, I think. So activity number 1 is creating a gift for the darkness. So I want you to pretend that you are going to make a sacrifice like the boys did. They made a sacrifice by cutting off the pig's head and leaving it for the pig, or leaving it for the beast. What sacrifice would you make to appease the beast on the island? I want you to find something around your house, draw a picture, or create something using craft supplies you have lying around. You can create anything to present to the beast as a sacrifice. Of course, it doesn't have to be a living thing. When you create your gift, upload a picture and 1 to 3 sentences describing your gift and why you think that object will best stop the beast from coming after you. Feel free to get creative. So that's 3 parts. You have to find or create a gift, write 1 to 3 sentences explaining why you think that, why you chose that gift, and 3, why you think that object will stop the beast from coming after you. These directions will be up on Schoology, so don't worry about that. The second activity is to write a narrative from the perspective of the Lord of the Flies. This past week you could have written a 1-page story called The Beast. This time you can write a 1-page personal narrative from the perspective of the Lord of the Flies that explores the ideas and influences of the Lord of the Flies through chapter 8 in the novel. It can be typed or handwritten, and if you're writing it by hand, upload the picture and send it through Schoology or email. Some of the questions you could answer in this personal narrative is, what has the Lord of the Flies been doing this whole time? What does he think about the boys? What plans does he have for them? Have fun with it. Remember, it's a first-person point of view story told from the perspective of the Lord of the Flies, Satan. And the last activity is to choose any real tropical island in the world. So you'll have to do a little research on tropical islands. Pick an island and then report out to me. You're going to choose any tropical island in the world and teach me about its positive attributes. You'll tell me about the island and where it's located, and then you'll make a bullet list of 20 to 30 positive qualities about the island. You have to include 1 or 2 pictures of the island, and you have to include what your sources are. You cannot use Wikipedia for your sources, okay? So that is your choice and exploration homework. And a couple other points of business, and I'll be done for today. You have to read chapters 9 and 10 next, but it's not due next week. It is due April 20th, along with this homework assignment, all right? It's great to get it to me before the 20th, because the 20th is when I'll be going with my new video and new assignments. But next week, you'll see a video from me, but it won't be about Lord of the Flies. The district is providing development during what was supposed to be our spring break, so it's going to be a little different. I haven't looked at it closely. I know we got something in the mail today about it in our email, but again, they're providing the lessons for us and we are providing them to you. I don't think there's going to be much homework. So for me, you have to read chapters 9 and 10, do the study guide, and do the choice and exploration homework. And that's all due before April 20th, okay? So you should get it done as soon as you can. I'm just checking to make sure I covered all my bases, and I think I have. 48 minutes long today. I'm sorry it took so long, but we had a lot to talk about. Please stay well, stay in touch, get your work done, okay? Because I worry about you, and I want to make sure that you're successful, and I don't want you to fall behind. So I'm here all the time at my computer, at my desk, answering questions, grading papers. So reach out, and just know that if you don't reach out to me, I'm going to be reaching out to you. I'll call you or I'll email you, but I'll haunt you, and you don't want that. So take care. Miss you guys. Bye-bye.